Hello, this is Ivy Fetaplace, and this is my presentation on my final decision making and things for the coffee shop. Hello, this is my presentation on the coffee shop final standings. Sorry, I'm a little sick. So, this is my logo for B3 Coffee, which is what I chose to name my coffee shop. So B3 comes from a song by the artist D1. In the song, he famously says, "Be real, be righteous, be relevant," also known as Threes Up. B3 is an original rendition of this catchphrase. The phrase first came into my life because a good friend of mine was obsessed with this song and lived his life according to that principle. When he tragically died in a car accident in 2017, the phrase soon became my mantra. And so I chose B3 Coffee, be real, be righteous, be relevant for my project. So for company objectives, because B3 is so important to me, the company objectives reflect that saying. So for Be Real, there's an inclusive community and open and honest employees. And so it's interesting because my degree isn't in business in the slightest. I'm actually getting a ministerial leadership degree. And so ministerial leadership was kind of my frame of mind when going through this class. And so to me, it's just really important to have an inclusive community. I think of just lost people who would come into this coffee shop and just find love and joy in an inclusive community that's open and accepting to people. And then open and honest employees. I think employer relationships are really important because if the employees feel valued and like they can be honest and open with their employer, it only increases the business productivity and relationships within the business. For Be Righteous, we want to be righteous in the way that we do things. So doing that ethically, what we buy it, how we function. Too many companies in modern America exploit their finances and workers in order to get ahead. That's not the case here. Like I said, because ministerial leadership is my personal major, I just thought of this of exploiting our relationships in this coffee shop. So we don't want to overwork our employees so they hate their jobs. We don't want to cut corners and do crazy things to our taxes in order to save money. Instead, we want to be ethical and then also be righteous in our attitudes and our actions. And so we aren't going to have an openly Christian coffee shop. The goal is to have a place where the Spirit of God dwells and our attitudes reflect our religious beliefs. And so we want to have a Christian coffee shop that is righteous. And then in the things that we do to our employees and customers, we want to be righteous. And so we don't want to say like negative things to our employees. We don't want our employees saying negative things or doing negative things to our customers. We want to really be righteous and positive and uplifting in what we're doing. And then finally, be relevant. So in our decor and physical space, I think that that is so important to have a place where people want to be. We want to be relevant in the trends that other coffee shops are doing. And then in our social media is super, super important and staying relevant in that, keeping it updated and consistent. And then finally, in the rest of the market. So, we want to host artists and musicians and have galleries. We want to have open mic nights and host community events, and so that we are relevant and kind of stand out from the rest of the market because we're so involved in the community. We're so people oriented that we're relevant in our community. So for my startup decisions, I chose the better espresso machine and then opted out for the thrifted furniture. And so I wanted to focus on spending my money where the production would be. And so I wanted to make sure that we had the advanced espresso machine we would be able to make more coffee, make more quality coffee. Additionally, I personally like thrifted furniture. Almost all the furniture in my apartment is thrifted, and so I like the homey feel of it. And so while it did save me money, I also like the idea of having a more homey coffee shop that has, a more loving attitude. I started with 2 managers and 6 employees. I really had no rationale for a lot of these things because I had such a small idea of what business was. Like I said, I have in no way have a business mindset or a business degree. So a lot of these decisions I kind of just decided to make and then learned from my mistakes as the simulation went on. And so I just kind of thought about the coffee shops that I frequent, how many people work there, and kind of just based my initial decisions on that. And then once I started seeing what everybody else in the market was doing and I started to see what worked and what didn't, I found a better way to decide how many employees and managers to have. I started with a price of $350. Again, that's kind of what Biz Cafe started me at, and I thought that it sounded like a good number. So not a lot of really smart thinking behind that one. For promotion, I did a general awareness online and then 2 spots a day on the radio. In retrospect, I think I would have preferred to put a lot of the money into the online and not so much on the radio. I just don't know if the radio spots were necessarily worth it because the radio isn't something that is used a lot anymore. Operating hours, I chose 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., which was just the basic thing that Biz Cafe started me out as. In retrospect, I have no idea why I did that. 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. are just terrible hours for a coffee shop. Everybody's already at work by 10 a.m. and by 7:30 p.m. no one wants to drink coffee. People just want to go to bed. And so I ended up changing my operating hours pretty quick because it wasn't realistic. I chose the good coffee type mostly because of the price. I didn't want to spend money necessarily on the higher coffee right away just because I wanted to see how many how many people actually went. And then this is a typo. The number of cups was 5,000 cups, not $5,000 on cups. That would be crazy. I did 5,000 cups because I knew that we would go through them eventually, and that was the best bang for my buck. And so I did that because I knew that they would be put to use at some point during the simulation. This is my income statement. As you can see, it has all of the information here with my net income at $9,745.14, and then the year to date being that 14,000 number. So you can see all of that, and then this is my final balance sheet showing my total assets, my total liabilities, and my total equity, and all of that. The business concept that I found most interesting and that would connect to my career is the target market. So a target market is a particular group of consumers at which a product or service is aimed. And so a target market is super important in ministry because you need to have your audience in mind in everything that you do. So if you're making a decision about, what the next sermon series is going to be, if what life groups we're going to launch, what activities we're going to do throughout the year, you have to definitely have a target market in mind, because if you're trying to reach, young adults, that curriculum, that agenda is going to look a lot different if you're trying to reach kids or if you're trying to reach someone in an older generation. And so, age group, social cues, trends are all important in not only establishing a church, but also making new changes in a pre-existing church. So just really knowing who you're trying to reach in the church and also outside the church. It's super important that you have a target market that isn't a part of your current market. So you want to have a frame of reference to the outsider, to someone who doesn't believe in God yet. You want to make sure that the decisions you're making, the agendas you're making, the curriculum you're making are not only servicing the target market that you already have in your church, but also the people who are outside the church that will eventually come in. So, target market, I think, was the most applicable aspect to my degree, since my degree doesn't have really do with business at all. So, I just really connected with the idea of knowing who I'm talking to if I'm preaching, knowing um, the target audience of my curriculum, agenda, etc. So I had a couple takeaways. Again, like I said a couple times, this class was actually pretty difficult for me because I don't really do anything with business. I don't really like numbers. I'm much more people oriented. And so this class was probably one of the hardest classes I've taken in college just because it's so unlike my degree. But there were a couple things that I just took away from it. First is just that the decisions I make as a leader affect everyone in the company, i.e., the church in my scenario. Um, so the decisions I make impact my team, so like my employees. If I decide that we're going to go this direction in a church or this direction in a ministry, it affects um, my team of leaders, my team of staff that works at the church with me, and the customers, so to speak, as in the audience. So if I decide to take our ministry one way, but all of our attendees don't like it, it'll drastically affect my business and how well the church performs. Another thing that I thought was just really interesting was the labor market equilibrium. And so, just the idea that there is like a target price that wages should be at, like there is a balanced wage. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of times in the church, the wages of people who work in the church falls below that equilibrium wage. And so, obviously, there's a lot that goes into it, and everybody who joins the ministry doesn't join for what they'll make to be a pastor. But I do think that it's something interesting that we should consider, that it has historically been below the labor market equilibrium, and if finances allow in a ministry that I would be running, I would want to have our wages be closer to the labor market equilibrium. And then finally, this class is just a good reminder of stewardship, just making sure that I'm doing the best with what I have and that I'm not wasting any of my resources, and also just forward thinking and goal setting as I was projecting, how many cups of coffee I'd sell the next week, or how am I going to get that, and the special decisions that I was making. Just always thinking one step ahead, like, oh, what if um, I increase my coffee by how much I buy every week, and then I waste 10 pounds, and just being able to think ahead. So thinking ahead of, what's the next series going to be? What's our next numerical goal going to be? And being able to just consider that when making the decisions of the everyday church life. So that was my experience with Biz Cafe. It was super interesting, and I'm super glad that I was able to experience it.